It was supposed to be an ordinary holiday, a short break, sunlight, laughter, a chance for two young parents to rest while their children slept peacefully just a few meters away. On the evening of May 3, 2007, the McCann family followed a routine they had already practiced several times during their stay in Praia da Luz, a quiet resort town in southern Portugal. The children were bathed, pajamas were on. The bedroom curtains were drawn slightly to let in the cool night air. 3-year-old Madeleine lay in bed beside her younger twin siblings. Her parents kissed her goodnight. They left the apartment door unlocked, and they walked away. The tapas restaurant was less than a minute's walk from the holiday apartment, close enough to check on the children regularly, close enough to feel safe, close enough, they believed, to hear if anything went wrong. Every parent has replayed that moment in their mind, the decision that seems harmless until it isn't. At around 8:30 p.m., Kate and Jerry McCann joined friends at the restaurant. Wine was poured, food arrived, conversation drifted between holiday plans and daily life. At 8:50 p.m., Kate left the table to check on the children. Everything appeared normal. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. Madeleine and the twins were asleep. The window was closed. The room was quiet. Kate returned to the table. At 9:05 p.m., another friend checked. Again, nothing seemed wrong. But at 10 p.m., when Kate McCann stood up to perform what she believed would be another routine check, something felt different almost immediately. The bedroom door was wider open than before. The room felt colder. The window was open. The shutters were raised, and Madeleine's bed was empty. At first, Kate thought she must be mistaken, that Madeleine had climbed into bed with the twins, that she was hiding, that this was a momentary panic. Then reality hit. Madeleine was gone. What followed was chaos compressed into minutes. Kate ran back to the restaurant screaming that her daughter had been taken. Jerry sprinted toward the apartment, friends scattered in every direction, shouting Madeleine's name into the darkness. Guests emerged from rooms, lights flicked on, doors slammed open. But there was no sign of the child. No scream had been heard, no struggle reported, no witnesses who could say with certainty that they had seen her taken. Police were called. The local authorities arrived, and from that moment on, the case that would become one of the most famous disappearances in modern history began to unravel. The apartment was searched, the surrounding streets were canvassed, dogs were brought in. But the initial response was slow, cautious, procedural. Too slow, some would later argue. Hours passed, then days. The Portuguese police initially treated the case as an abduction. Roadblocks were set up, borders were monitored, sketches of a man seen carrying a child were circulated. Witnesses came forward, or believed they did. One reported seeing a man carrying a sleeping child away from the area that night. Another described a suspicious figure loitering near the apartment days earlier. But details conflicted, timelines blurred, descriptions changed, and no physical evidence clearly pointed to a single suspect. Meanwhile, the media descended. Within days, Madeleine's face was everywhere. Television screens, newspapers, billboards, online forums. She became the symbol of every parent's worst fear. And with attention came speculation. Endless speculation. Why were the children left alone? Why was the door unlocked? Why did no one hear anything? Every decision made by the McCanns was dissected, replayed, and judged by millions who had not been there. As the investigation continued, the focus began to shift from an unknown intruder to the parents themselves. In September 2007, just 4 months after Madeleine vanished, Kate and Jerry McCann were named arguidos, formal suspects under Portuguese law. The announcement sent shockwaves across the world. Suddenly, the grieving parents were no longer just victims. They were suspects in their own daughter's disappearance. Police suggested that Madeleine may have died in the apartment and that her parents had covered it up. No body was found. No clear cause of death was identified. But the idea took hold. Cadaver dogs alerted to spots in the apartment and to the family's rental car, a vehicle the McCanns did not even have access to until weeks after Madeleine disappeared. The alerts were not proof, but they were enough to fuel doubt, and doubt spreads faster than facts. Public opinion fractured. Some believed the McCanns were victims of a flawed investigation. Others believed the truth was being hidden in plain sight. The parents denied all allegations. They cooperated with police. They hired lawyers. They continued searching. And all the while, Madeleine remained missing. In July 2008, Portuguese authorities closed the case. No charges were filed. No suspect was arrested. The McCanns were cleared. But the story did not end there. Because when a child disappears without answers, the questions never stop. Years passed, leads came and went. Sightings were reported across Europe and beyond. None confirmed, none proven. Madeleine McCann remained frozen in time, forever 3 years old in the public imagination. And somewhere buried beneath theories, mistakes, and unanswered questions, the truth waited. Still unseen, still silent, still unresolved. As the case went cold in Portugal, the attention surrounding Madeleine never truly faded. Instead, it evolved. The questions grew sharper, the theories more elaborate, and the silence where answers should have been became unbearable for those still searching. In 2011, 4 years after Madeleine vanished, British authorities took an unprecedented step. Scotland Yard announced it was reopening the investigation. They called it Operation Grange. For the first time, a full independent review of the evidence was conducted by UK investigators, separate from Portuguese police. They re-examined thousands of documents, witness statements, timelines, and forensic reports. What they found disturbed them enough to act. British detectives identified several individuals who had never been fully investigated. Men seen near the apartment complex, strangers spotted carrying children, break-ins reported in the area around the same time. They believed the original investigation may have missed critical leads. In 2013, police released new suspect sketches to the public. Images of men seen around Praia da Luz on the night Madeleine disappeared. One sketch showed a man carrying a child toward the beach. Hope surged again. Phones rang non-stop at police stations. But once again, nothing concrete emerged. No arrest, no confirmation, no Madeleine. Behind the scenes, however, investigators were beginning to suspect something far darker. They theorized that Madeleine's disappearance may have been the result of an opportunistic abduction by someone familiar with the area. Someone who knew the routines of tourists. Someone who knew which doors were left unlocked. And that suspicion led them, years later, to one name. A name that would reignite the case in a way no one expected. In June 2020, 13 years after Madeleine vanished, German authorities made a stunning announcement. They identified a suspect they believed was responsible for Madeleine's disappearance. A German man. A convicted sex offender. His name was Christian Bruckner. Bruckner had lived in the Algarve region at the time Madeleine disappeared. He owned a vehicle registered near Praia da Luz. His phone records placed him close to the apartment complex on the night of May 3, 2007. Even more unsettling, he had a history of sexual crimes against children. For the first time in years, investigators publicly stated that they believed Madeleine McCann was dead. The announcement sent shockwaves across the world. Parents who had clung to hope felt it shatter. Others felt grim relief that a suspect had finally emerged. But once again, certainty remained just out of reach. Bruckner denied any involvement. No physical evidence directly tied him to Madeleine. No witness could place him at the scene with certainty. And despite years of investigation, prosecutors admitted they still lacked the proof needed to charge him. The case hovered in a terrible limbo. Strong suspicion, weak evidence, and a child still missing. As details about Bruckner surfaced, investigators uncovered a disturbing lifestyle. He lived off-grid. He committed burglaries. He spent time in isolated rural properties. He spoke openly, according to acquaintances, about disturbing fantasies. In one reported conversation, a witness claimed Bruckner described abducting a child from an apartment. The words chilled investigators, but words alone were not enough. Searches were conducted across Portugal and Germany. Wells were drained. Remote land was excavated. Storage units were searched. Still, nothing. Every search ended the same way. Empty, silent, unanswered. Meanwhile, the McCann family continued to live in a state of suspended grief. They marked birthdays without a daughter. They issued annual statements. They kept Madeleine's room intact. And they endured relentless public scrutiny. Even after being cleared, suspicion never fully disappeared. In internet forums, armchair detectives dissected every interview, every facial expression, every sentence the parents spoke. Conspiracy theories flourished. Some accused authorities of protecting powerful individuals. Others believed the truth was hidden behind legal barriers and diplomatic caution. The case became less about evidence and more about belief. What people wanted to believe, what they feared, and what they could not let go. Experts who reviewed the case noted critical early mistakes. The apartment was not sealed quickly enough. Too many people walked through the scene. Potential evidence was contaminated. Key witness statements were delayed. Small errors that, together, may have cost investigators their only real chance at answers. Time became the greatest enemy. Memories faded. Footage was erased. Witnesses moved on. And Madeleine disappeared not just from sight, but from certainty. Years later, a haunting question still lingers. What if Madeleine was alive for days, weeks, or even months after that night? What if someone saw something but didn't realize its importance? What if the truth passed by unnoticed in the chaos? These questions torment investigators and parents alike. Because unlike most crimes, there is no final moment to point to. No confirmed ending. No closure. Only an empty bed, an open window, and a silence that refuses to break. Even now, authorities continue to search. Leads are followed, information is reviewed, and Christian Bruckner remains under scrutiny, though still uncharged in Madeleine's case. Hope flickers weakly, but it has not fully died. And maybe that is the cruelest part. The case of Madeleine McCann exists in a space between hope and despair, between belief and evidence, between what might have happened and what can never be proven. A child vanished from a room just meters away from her parents, and the world watched and waited and is still waiting. As the years stretch on, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann has become something more than a case file. It has turned into a global obsession, a mirror reflecting fear, guilt, blame, and the desperate human need for answers. But beneath the headlines and documentaries lies a quieter truth, one that investigators, psychologists, and even ordinary people struggle to confront. Because the most terrifying possibility is not what we imagine happened. It is what we may never know. When Scotland Yard reviewed the case, they identified dozens of investigative failures in the earliest hours after Madeleine vanished. Doors left unsecured, witnesses interviewed days too late, surveillance footage overwritten, names misspelled, times recorded inaccurately. In most criminal investigations, those errors might be survivable. In a missing child case, they are often fatal. The apartment itself became a symbol of that failure. Too many people walked through it. Friends, police, resort staff. Footprints overlapped. Fingerprints smeared. The crime scene, if it ever truly existed, dissolved before it could speak. And once that happens, truth becomes fragile. Theories filled the vacuum. Some believed Madeleine wandered off on her own, confused and frightened. Others believed an intruder entered through the open window. Still others believed someone known to the family was involved. Every theory found supporters. Every theory found critics. But none could be proven. Behavioral experts noted that abductions of this nature are often crimes of opportunity. A door unlocked, a routine observed, a child left alone for just long enough. Praia da Luz was quiet. Tourists came and went. Apartments were predictable. Schedules repeated. To the wrong person, it may have looked like an invitation. Investigators later discovered that burglaries had been reported in the area around the time Madeleine disappeared. Thieves entering apartments through open windows, taking valuables, leaving quietly. One question haunted detectives. What if someone entered the apartment expecting to steal property and instead found a child? If so, panic would have followed. Improvisation, decisions made in seconds that would echo for decades. But again, speculation is not evidence, and evidence is what the case lacks most. The McCanns returned to England under a cloud of suspicion that never fully lifted. Their faces became symbols of grief, but also of controversy. Every interview was analyzed, every pause scrutinized. Grief, experts say, does not follow a script, but the public often expects it to. When people do not cry on cue, suspicion grows. When they speak too calmly, doubt emerges. When they continue living, others feel anger. Kate and Jerry McCann were judged not just as parents, but as characters in a story the world believed it owned. And that judgment became another layer of damage. Meanwhile, Madeleine's image remained frozen in time. Progressed age renderings were released, posters updated, campaigns continued. But years passed without answers. Children who vanished in similar ways were later found, some alive, some not. But Madeleine remained different. She vanished into a blind spot, a gap between countries, between jurisdictions, between evidence and assumption. And in that gap, truth slipped away. Christian Bruckner remains the most serious suspect to date. German authorities have stated their belief that he is responsible, but belief does not equal proof. Without physical evidence, without witnesses willing to testify, without a body, the case cannot move forward in court, and so it stalls. Again, each year, funding is renewed, statements are released, investigations quietly continue, and the same sentence is repeated. The search for Madeleine McCann continues. But behind those words is a painful reality. Time does not help missing children cases. It erodes them. The longer a case goes unsolved, the more fragile it becomes. The more memory replaces fact. The more theory replaces truth. Eventually, what remains is not a case, but a question. What really happened in that apartment on May 3rd, 2007? Was Madeleine taken by a stranger? Did someone watch, wait, and act? Did an accident occur that night, followed by panic and concealment? Or does the truth lie somewhere darker, stranger, and far more complex than anyone is willing to admit? The silence surrounding the case is not empty. It is heavy. It carries the weight of a child who should have grown up, of parents who never stopped searching, of investigators who know they may have failed, and of a world that may never know the truth. Some mysteries are unsolved because they are complex. Others remain unsolved because they were mishandled. And some remain unsolved because the truth disappeared before anyone realized it mattered. Madeleine McCann's disappearance sits at the intersection of all three. A child vanished, a case fractured, and silence filled the space where answers should have been. If Madeleine is gone, the world may never know how or why. If she is alive somewhere, the chances of reunion shrink with every passing year. And that uncertainty is the cruelest outcome of all. Because hope, when stretched too long,